Right, so Dan Wootton, for some inexplicable reason, is still very much on TV as GB News, aka GBBs, so called because they squeal, "You can't tell us what to do. If you try, we'll scream and scream and scream until we're sick." Has, without a single trace of irony, now come out with the golden nugget that we need tougher law and order in the UK and need to implement a hostile environment for refugees. Well, where should we start with that then, Dan? You want a hostile environment. Working with you is one, according to all those allegations, isn't it? You're a migrant yourself. Perhaps instead of having a cosy chat with Lee Anderson on your show almost every time you're on screen, he might tell you to what he's told asylum seekers to do, who aren't keen on being put on a death trap of a barge nicknamed the Floating Grenfell, and tell you to F off back to New Zealand, where you're from. But then Anderson likes you. You're his sort. You're joining in the calls to make this country more offensive to people not from here. The hypocrisy, writ very large indeed, vomit-inducing stuff as it is. Imagine if any of them are here despite allegations of sexual impropriety or blackmail and extortion, even impersonating someone else in order to acquire such content. I mean, you can imagine if it were an Afghan who had come here guilty of such things, but obviously that hasn't happened. But it is what you're accused of, and have indeed been suspended by the Daily Mail group of all places because it's too much for them, yet not for GBBs and not for your co-hosts, so many of whom occupy the Tory backbenches. It's pretty grim stuff. As for a hostile environment, though, anywhere within 6 feet of Anderson is pretty hostile. The man who has a temper trigger itchier than one of your nan's knitted Christmas presents. But equally, it's apparently a pretty hostile place to be on the other end of a phone from Dirty Dan. However, I've some good news for the Wootons and Andersons of this country, because according to Byline Times, the same people who have been serialising these allegations against Wootton, no less, the go-home vans are coming back. Kinda. Suella Braverman, for it is, of course, she, is taking them digital, though. In fact, they've already gone digital. Cyber go-home vans, no less. No more will the vans drive around warning people not to be here without any legal right. Now they're going to get targeted by digital hostile environment campaign ads, because nothing is as guaranteed to have said people quaking in fear as much as targeted harassment on the streets than an advert popping up on Facebook telling them to go home as well. In fact, they're already being rolled out. Things like, "Don't lose your life for the sake of coming to Britain," and "Small boats will be destroyed by big ones." Nothing at all menacing about the latter. Of course, nobody wants to use the small boats route to get here, but without a safe legal route to claim asylum, such is the choice successive governments have left people, and it is not their fault that that is the case. It is political choice to leave people drowning at sea rather than permit and provide a legal route to get here. Now, of course, if you've been on Facebook or Instagram, you won't have seen these ads. You might be thinking, Damo, you're making this one up, aren't you? And perhaps this is why Desperate Dan hasn't seen them either, maybe. He is still white, after all. But it's particularly telling when these ads are being run in languages such as Arabic or of Pashto, the language spoken in Iran, Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan, as to where they are being targeted and who they are targeting. In fact, you might be stunned to hear that this isn't even a Braverman policy, that these ads have been going out to some 35 different countries since 2019, and the Tories have blown some £2.6 million on them. Well, the boats have still been coming, haven't they? So they're working wonderfully well, clearly then. Why have we not heard more about this then, Damo? Well, what was the public reaction to the go-home bans of Theresa May then, back in 2013, if you can think back that far, 10 years ago as it was now? Seems a heck of a long time. The public went mad, didn't they? We went ape. The Tories were slammed as racists. They were an evil dog whistle response straight out of the book of the National Front, a desperate attempt by the then Cameron government to appeal to UKIP voters who they were losing support to. There was massive public outcry against them because we saw them in the street and hated those responsible for such blatant nastiness. So here's the joy of making them digital and making them targeted. Those of us who were appalled by such things don't know anything about it because we don't see them. Despite having been happening for 4 years now, we're only now really getting wind of them because the mainstream media, who have, as usual, been completely silent on the matter, basically complicit, so they can't actually be trusted. And even if they agreed with such appalling policy, the waste of public money given they do not flaming work is something they ought to have raised the issue over. The boats have still come. Brexit has meant more have come, not less, so this policy has served no purpose except to portray our country as embarrassingly racist, flouting our responsibilities as signatories of the Refugee Convention, the Human Rights Act, served as an excuse-making exercise for there being no legal asylum route to the rest of the world, whilst most of us know absolutely nothing about it. The Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants have said the Home Office continues to target people who seek safety in our country and squander heaps of money on useless, absurd and punitive anti-refugee scare campaigns. The government's scaremongering propaganda campaigns are cruel and we know they won't work. Instead of wasting public money on creating a digital hostile environment, this government could be investing in pulling the country out of a cost of living crisis, fixing their broken immigration system, and helping people rebuild their lives in our country. Completely true, I totally agree. But the Tories need their culture war as the only means they can think of to attract votes, and channels like GB News and hosts that should be suspended, like Dan Wootton, need to keep ramping up the same rhetoric to remain relevant to the drooling hard-right dregs of our society, but pay attention to them and hang on their every word. Here's what makes this so much worse than the go home bans, though. It's not possible to target would-be refugees or migrants directly. So instead, to target the ads, racial profiling is conducted. And this makes the entire exercise a completely racist endeavour. If you speak a certain language, you're more likely to get targeted. If you come from a certain country, you are more likely to get targeted. But some of the examples Byline have highlighted are weirdly specific. You could, for example, get targeted for such an advert if you have expressed a liking for Syrian food, for example, or you said how much you like the Syrian football team, which kind of implies there is, where these more specific examples of profiling are involved, a heightened effort to put off some people from some places more than others. And you can argue that in the case of Syria, for whom war has displaced a lot of people, that areas where more refugees or immigrants are likely to come from, such as there, the greater the effort in targeting them to put them off, the Tories have conducted. At least that's certainly how it appears to me. Adding to that, people are more likely to be targeted if they happen to be resident in other countries, such as France or Belgium, but haven't necessarily come from there, where there may be an increased chance, therefore, it can be perceived, of those people coming here or trying to. The excuses by the Home Office, and of course the kind of messaging put out by right-wing media outlets, is that the government have a duty to warn people about the dangers of using criminal gangs. And as much as that might be true as things stand, the government could put them all out of business at a stroke with a legal asylum route. So it doesn't wash. They're indulging in targeted racism, targeted offensiveness and unpleasantness, even threatening behaviour it can be seen as, in order to keep people away as part of this new digital hostile environment. It'll make people like Dan Wootton so happy to hear about all this, I'm sure, but then it's been exposed by Byline. So if you did agree with this and got rather pleased at this headline and did pay attention to this Byline story, well, he's not exactly in a position where he can pick and choose his headlines from there, is he? Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. New content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a vid recommendation for you where Wootton finally got suspended by the Lord Rothermere bunch, making GBVs even less reputable than the Daily Mail. And, well, I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.